Now, one of the weaknesses of this whole argument, yesterday I was at my son's grade 9 farewell. It's kind of like a graduation without the graduation because it's only grade 9. And anyways, across the room, I kept staring at this one guy because I was like, I know him. We have got to have met before. It turned out he was just another bald guy. But that brings us back to the Jesus. No, he didn't meet another bald guy. Well, he probably did. But more importantly, Jesus, when he called his first 4 disciples. You've heard the story before in Mark 1, Luke 5. Speaking of that, you should click on the link above here somewhere because I've done a little story of my take of Luke's choose your own adventure on that. But on the other hand, Matthew also in chapter 4, he records a very similar event where Jesus calls his first 4 disciples. And it feels like it's just out of the blue. Out of nowhere, Jesus is walking along the shores of Galilee. He sees these 4 guys, Peter and Andrew, calls them and says, I will make you fishers of men. And then he also goes on in James and John, he does the same thing. And it's just like one of those, wow, why would 4 people meet a total strangers and leave everything they have to follow him? And then we go, it's because he's God. Now, I don't want to get in the debate whether or not Jesus is God. That's a whole different story. But I think if we set this story in context, you'll actually find out there's much more that you and I can relate to of how Jesus goes about starting his movement. And in that, he isn't actually meeting 4 strangers. Now, the first one is, let's just deal with Peter and Andrew, the first ones he calls. So in John, chapter 1, I think it's 28 or something like that. Check, find out. Actually, we'll look right now. John chapter 1, verse 40 reads, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the 2 who heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, we have found the Messiah, that is the Christ. So that was a fairly easy connection. So if we take John as historical, which I know a lot of scholars like, John's a lot different than the synoptics. But if we just say there are historical information in the Gospel of John, then we have that Andrew was a disciple of John the Baptist. Jesus also was a disciple of John the Baptist. Somehow or other the 2 met and started a relationship. Then, after John the Baptist gets arrested, Jesus goes up to Galilee and re-meets Andrew and his brother, Simon, and he says, let's start the mission again. I will make you fishers of men. Come join me on the mission that we started under John the Baptist. And he does exactly that. But then, what about the 2 other guys right beside him, James and John? John doesn't mention them in the gospel, well, not at the beginning of his gospel. How do we count for them? Well, this, I propose that they're actually Jesus' cousins. Now, this is going to take a little bit to make the connections, and I will show you in a minute in the slides of how, if you follow some little verses back and forth in the Gospels, how we connect that Jesus and James and John were cousins. Connected, probably knew each other already, so when Jesus called them, they weren't following somebody out of the blue. And the reason I mention all this is I think we can take inspiration from Jesus here and his calling. And that is that Jesus, when he started his movement, his ministry, he didn't actually start cold turkey. He started from where he knew. Yes, he had gone back to Nazareth, and that hadn't worked out. But he still called people he knew to start his movement. He didn't go cold turkey. He went on a slightly warmed up turkey. Andrew was already very keenly interested in the teachings of John the Baptist, and he also really hard for that. And Simon probably did too. So then, it's just a matter of connecting James and John, which we will do. So here we have it. Some of my books about the historical Jesus, and then my computer screen. let's walk through this. So, just to establish, first of all, we believe Mary, and nobody really debates this one very much, that Mary is the mother of Jesus. So we'll learn that in Mark chapter 6, verse 3, that the people of Nazareth knew Jesus is by his mother, Mary. And of course, we have the nativity stories in both Matthew and Luke who say the similar things. So that's a clearly established thing. I don't think we have to really argue about that one. So then we have over here, we have James and John. I just picked two icons for them. That would just represent James and John here in our picture here. And I really did this is because I find it made it a lot easier to understand the argument that I had read on this one blog. And it really is really helpful to understand if you kind of see the picture here. So the next, we have to establish, so James and John, in Mark 3 verse 17, Jesus meets James and John and his sons of Zebedee, and he names them sons of thunder. So I just have a thunder cloud here to represent that their dad is Zebedee, or Boanerges. I don't know how to speak Aramaic, sorry. I just chose this lady to represent that Zebedee had a wife, which let's just assume that he had a wife. And this wife was the mother of James and John. But what is her name? That is the question. So it's going to take a little while to get there, but let's just work us through here. So at the cross again, in Matthew 27, verse 56, it says, among which was Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Joseph and the mother of Zebedee's children. So let's just label her as the mother of Zebedee's children. And there's Mary the mother of James and Joseph and Mary Magdalene. So all three of these ladies, according to Matthew, are standing at the cross. And then if we go down a little bit further, in Mark 15, verse 40, it says, there were also women looking on afar off. Among the women was Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, yes, and Salome. So we're going to say that the mother of Zebedee's children also can be named Salome. So now we have three women, Mary Magdalene, Salome, and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. And then John 19, verse 25 says, now there stood by the cross. So again, we're talking different angle from the cross of who is standing there observing Jesus being crucified. Of Jesus, his mother. So we have Mary, Jesus' mother, and his mother's sister, and Mary, the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. So we're going to assume here that the wife of Cleopas was also the mother of James and Joseph. I don't know this, but we're going to assume this, or she's another Mary. So then if we assume that, then Mary's sister would be this same lady, Salome. So then we know that these three ladies would mean that Salome is Mary's sister, making Mary the aunt of James and John. Therefore, Jesus and James and John are cousins. Now, one of the weaknesses of this whole argument that Salome and Mary are sisters and therefore James and John are cousins of Jesus is something that Richard Bauckham in his book Jesus and the Eyewitnesses. So he does a lot of research, and one of the things he researched is the writings of names listed in the time of Jesus. Roughly, I think it was 100 BCE or maybe 200 to about 100 CE after. Show up on the slide. But one of the things that he does point out is the naming of women and the popularity of them. You know, every year before, when you're trying to pick out your child's name, they go like most popular name of that year, 2019, 1977, all those kind of stuff. What is the most popular name? Like for myself, I meet a lot of people in my name. My brother's same thing. But Mary and Salome probably had the same issue. Because as Bauckham points out, the number one female name in Palestine around the time of Jesus, plus or minus 100 years, was, drumroll, Mary or Miriam. So, as the slides show, even in the crowd watching Jesus as he's being crucified, there is a lot of Marys. Mary's is a very popular name, and it would be easy enough to cross and connect the wrong Mary, so that would make the whole thing fall apart. And number two, you are not going to believe this one. Number two most popular female names around the time of Jesus is Salome. Yes. So, Mary and what I believe to be her sister, their parents were not very creative. They picked two of the most popular female names of the time and they named their child that. Which then it would be easy enough that even though their names are specifically mentioned in the Gospels, connecting them to each other, that it could be just another Mary. And if that is the case, then we're back to ground zero. And Jesus walking down the beaches of Galilee, and he sees two strangers. No, he still knows Peter and Andrew. Don't get that wrong. He still knows Peter and Andrew. But James and John, it's only because Luke tells us they're partners of Peter. Otherwise, just two guys as he meets while he's walking down the Sea of Galilee.